guys, I am really sorry for the delay. Um, yeah, we're going to kick off right now. Apologies. Please drop a message for the others so they can join us. I was trying to rectify some technical issues that I was having, and I hope you can hear me. I hope you can hear me clearly. So please, if you can hear me, drop a message in the chats, right? So that we can get started already. All right. If you can hear me, drop a message in the chat so we can get started already. Yeah, Odibas, good evening. Okay, we are about to kick off. We're going to be discussing Pinia today for state management, right? We will take a look at what state management is. I'll try as much as possible to explain, from a practical standpoint, what state management is and how you work with state management, right, in view. Okay. So I'll be sharing my screen shortly so we can get started writing some code. 1 minute. All right. Okay, so you can see my screen. Do let me know. Wondering why I don't have permission. Okay, yeah, found it. Share the entire screen. All right. I have to close a couple of things from here. Terminate. Close. I was actually in the middle of you know working on some view projects. Okay, so I hope you can see my screen. This is I believe this is visible, right? And I hope you can hear me as well. So let us get started already. Let me try to expand this so you can see. Aha. All right, so we are going to be discussing Pinia, right? I mentioned that already, and as you can see, I am right on the website, right? You can simply visit pinia.vuejs.org, right? If you want to follow up with me while I code, because we are going to be looking at some of the resources on the website. I mean, this I believe is the best documentation, right? You can of course watch a video introduction to understand how to use Pinia. We have like a cheat sheet that you can work with, right? This is something I have benefited from myself. So you have the cheat sheet on View Mastery websites, and you can simply download that cheat sheet from here. So if I click on download, I can get that cheat sheet from here. Okay, so as you can see, I clicked on that and it just downloaded the cheat sheet. So when I click on that page, it brings me back. I think that is not okay. I don't think that was the right. Probably I will download this and share with you guys on the WhatsApp group and on the Discord server. Okay. So let's try to understand what state management is, and I'm going to do that with a simple representation on Excalibur. All right. Feel free to ask your questions, while I am explaining. Okay, so I'll be able to cover a lot of areas, and of course, do well to drop yeah, if you have questions, right, do well to drop those questions in the chat. I am looking at the chats from here, right? So it will be easier for us to move faster. Okay. Now, of course, I know we've covered a couple of things like props. I'm going to give an assumption again, like what I did the other day, right? So let's assume we have a simple component like this, and this is a card, right? Maybe like a block card or something, and then you have some text. Okay. Now the ideal thing here is that you are probably fetching these blog contents from a backend server, right? I don't really need to explain that again, but if you don't know, okay, so if you don't know what a backend server is, we are assuming we have a front-end application. So let me do some writing. We have our front-end application, which is what we are writing in Vue.js, right? So of course, you have to include your HTML, CSS, JavaScript. So this is basically our front end. Okay, we're using the Vue.js framework, which is what we're covering, and then you probably have some backend application, whatever it is written with, maybe Node.js, Express. So we'll get to talk about these things when we cover, we'll cover backend programming, right? Backend engineering. So the idea is your front end is going to make a request, right? So the front end is going to make a request to get this blog information. So the front end is going to request to say, I need blog posts. Okay. So yeah, so this is exactly what the front end is going to say. I need blog posts, and the back end would respond if it has those blog posts, of course. It would respond, with the blog post. Okay, so we'll call that the response blog post. Now, I've just given a simple analogy here. You might not be building, applications that are, separated this way. It might be a single application with front end and back end, built in together. We call that monoliths. Okay. If you're doing that, you are still going to request some of those blog information from your backend. It will fetch them from your database and it will present it on the front end. Now, when this gets to the front end, you want to be able to present all these items on the browser. Okay, we're trying to get somewhere. We're trying to get to state management. Okay, so when this gets back to your front end, you want to present all these blocks, right, in form of cards. Now, if you're in the last class, you remember we designed something like this, right? We had multiple cards on our screen, and we're able to render, like using a loop, we're able to render multiple cards on the screen, multiple components. You can also remember that each of those components, had what we call properties, right? Call them props. If you can't remember, I think, or if you are not in the class, you probably need to go back to that video. So we have props. So in the props, we can pass things like the image, right, which is what we render here. That can be a prop. So we can say the image is a prop. Yeah, the image is a prop. We can say this is for the heading, right? So the heading or the title is a prop. And then we also have the description, right? Another prop. Okay, so we are going to get this information, this blog post, and we're going to, use our components, our reusable component that we've designed or we've created in Vue. We're going to pass the image, the title, and the description, of each blog item. If we have 100 of this, we're going to pass 100 of that into 100 instances of our component, of our card, our blog card component. Okay, so let's call this our blog card component. Okay, that makes sense. All right, so we're going to pass those properties into that component, and you're going to have 100 block cards on your page, right, with the image, title, and the description. Now, whenever you refresh that page, or you probably just perform some kind of action that makes the page to reload, you are going to fetch this again and again and again, right? So if you make any refresh, if you perform any refresh by simply clicking on this, you are going to call the endpoint. So when I say endpoint, I'm referring to where we are calling to basically get those blocks, right? So let's say the backend endpoint, okay, to fetch the blocks again. Okay, and when we fetch those blog items, we are also going to when we fetch those blog items, we're also going to render them again. So we're going to render 100 cards again. If we refresh 10 times, we're going to render all these card items 10 times, right? Which is of course going to be like we are rendering I mean, you can imagine rendering 100 components, right? You keep rendering 100 components 10 times. Now the thing is, I mean, that is not super heavy. That is not something that your front end cannot handle, right? But sometimes you want to have a way to basically manage this data in what we call a state, right? So that you can always go back to that data and reuse that data across your application, except you decide to probably pull a fresh copy of that data. When you fetch that data for the first time, you can access that data from any component. You can access that data from any page, right? Any file, any view file, and you can basically, work with those data. I mean, that data is, saved in the Pinia store, right? Previously, we used what we call Vuex, which is of course, still popular. I just want to, also show you, let's see, Vuex. So we have something called Vuex. Pinia is, a newer version, right? A more advanced and better way of, managing states. This was the initial way, we manage states in Vue 2, right? So it's called Vuex, okay? As you can see, the official state management library for Vue has changed to Pinia. So it was formerly Vue. It was formerly Vuex, right? Used in managing the states. Very similar pattern to Pinia as well, and we'll get to cover Pinia right now. So I hope you understand that. What we are trying to do is to have a way to manage those kind of data, right, in our application without having to fetch those data over and over and over again. And instead of going the route of doing what we call um, uh, instead of going the route of passing props from one component to another just to reuse the value of that component in a different location. I mean, that is what most people might have done probably in the past 5 to 6 years. Yeah, I mean, you probably find some developers trying to pass a particular information from a certain component to a different component, and then they begin to pass in props, passing props from one particular component to another component to another component until they get to that specific component that they want to use the data. When you are working with the states, you can simply grab the states from any of these components without having to do what we call props chaining, right? So you can simply go to your states, and this is how it works. You fetch this particular information. You don't render that information straight into the card. So this time around, we simply make that request. When we make that request, we are going to so let me create what we call a store here, right? So I'm going to call this a store, and let's call this a block store. So now we are doing what we call state management. So we create what we call a blog store, right? Or we can just call this a store, but this is me giving it a name, right? So the name, we call it a blog store, okay? And within this blog store, we can now make this request. So let's make the request. Let's create some space here. Okay, hope this makes sense. All right, so this is where we basically we make the request. Okay, so we'll make the request saying, oh, I need the blog post, right? And then we'll get the response from the backend. Okay, so we'll get the response from the backend. Now we'll get the response from the backend. We'll save this in our Pinia states, right? So what happens is on the component, we can simply grab that data, right? So we can simply grab that data. So we're simply going to grab that data from here, right, and basically render the content of what we have collected on the front end. Okay, we're going to render that and pass that into this component, okay, as props, right? But this time around, we are not going to fetch this 100 times from the backend. When you refresh this page, we only have to go into our states, right? We only have to go into our store, right, which is basically being managed as a state in our application. We have to go into the store, grab that data that we've already received. We don't need to make any call again to the API, except we probably made some updates, or we intentionally want to pull the records again. Maybe we have some new records that might have been entered. We just want to pull that again, right? Instead of making 100 requests to the backend, we simply make one request and we reuse that data 100 times as we refresh, except we decide to pull it again ourselves. Hope that makes sense, right? I mean, this might not be the best, imagery. Of course, we don't have a single picture here, but I hope this makes sense. I will look at the chat right now for any questions before we dive into the documentation for Pinia, right? So I'll take any questions you have right now. Let me check the chats. Okay, so I'm giving you 2 minutes, right? You have any questions? Go ahead and drop your questions in the chat so that we can proceed. All right, let's be fast. If you have any questions regarding what I mean by state management or what I mentioned, I called, the store, ask your questions and we'll take that in the next 2 minutes. Okay. All right, so let's just say I probably just realized that 2 minutes is maybe too long. So I think 1 minute should be enough. If you have questions, you can drop your questions. I can't see any question yet, so my assumption is that we're good, right? Anolua, Odibas, Christophobi, I believe those are the names I can see. Yes, Samuel. If you have any questions, do well to drop those questions in the chat. If you don't have any questions, I believe we can proceed. So I was able to whip up a quick example for us. So we are going to be using this example. As you can see, this is our previous project. We've been working with this folder, this repository basically. We have this on GitHub, right? So I'm going to share this with you. But let's go ahead and see what we have. Let me quickly pull this up on Z. All right. So this is our code. Make sure we zoom in as well so you can see this very well. Okay, so I'm sure you are well aware of how we set up our view project, right? So this is basically how we set up our view project. I am going to show the code here while we also explore what we have on the documentation. So I hope you can see this clearly, right? I have made this very bold. This is simply our views page, right? This is our views page. While we explore this, let's go back to the documentation first, and you can simply read up. So you see we have some contents here. What exactly is Pinia, right? So Pinia started as an experiment to redesign what a store for Vue could look like with composition API. But of course, it also has it also works within the options API, which is what we're covering right now before we get to the composition API. Yeah, so this works with Vue 3, it works on Vue 2. I believe it works. Let's see, the API is same for both, except for installation on the SSR. Okay, and these docs are targeted to Vue 3 with notes about Vue 2 whenever necessary, so it can be read by. Oh yeah, so it definitely works. Okay, so this is a basic example. This is what it looks like. So you see, you basically import define store from Pinia, right? You are able to actually define a store. We call this store counter. So this is what we have defined as a store, right? We call this counter. So by the time we want to fetch a specific, state value, for example, here we have count. So count is a state value. If the value of count increases here to 1, wherever you call count in your entire application, wherever you call the count value from the counter store, it is going to give you the exact value you have here. Okay, so you see we have an action, and we'll get to talk about this shortly. We have an action under our store, right? Under our counter store, we have an action that performs increments. Okay, so basically the action is it's more like your methods, right? So it's your methods. Basically, you can simply use those actions to, of course, act upon what you have within your states, right? So this is the store counter. This is our states, and these are the values within our states. So you can store a couple of things in your states. Maybe your user data, your user information, full name, last name. The token, right? So you can store a couple of things in here down to your JSON array data, right? If you have a lot of data within your JSON array, maybe like a blog data, a product information, right? You can store all that within your store, all right? And let's take a look at what we have here. Okay, so you can then use the store within your component. So this is you trying to utilize this in your component. You import use counter store from that specific store that you created earlier. You see, we call that use counter store. Okay, So we are importing use counter store from this store. This is the file. So we created a file called counter.js. All right. And when we import that, you see we have store/counter. So we don't have to put .js, but this is basically /counter.js. All right. And now we say, okay, a constant variable of counter equals use counter store. All right. So by the time we call counter.count, it is simply going to give us counter.count, right? Okay. So if we say counter.patch, so you see here we have counter count, and we say counter.count plus one. We're basically performing, an increment, and it is simply going to perform that update. So if we say counter.increment as well, we are calling this specific method or this specific action, right? And this is going to increment the value of count by one, right? This dot count plus plus, which is count plus one. Okay. All right. So this is just we have some examples here. By the way, you can click to use this to try this in the playground, right? We've utilized the playground as well while we were learning the basics of Vue. So you see we have that example in here. We have the counter.js file in here. Okay, this is the app.vue, and you can basically increment this, right? We already have that increment happening here. All right. And yes, you can proceed to adjust this code. We don't have a button, but we can basically create a button and call this particular method against that button. We don't need to do that here for now. All right. We'll get to show you that example. Okay, so you see we have a couple of other examples here. Let us go straight into getting started. So what you do if you already have a Vue.js project, if you already have a Vue project, you can proceed to add Pinia as a package, right? Now, when you are creating a new Vue project, remember that you are always given the option. I think I need to take off my picture from here. You are always given the option. You are asked if you want to. Let me see. Does that take off my picture? What is that? Sorry. Mm, give me a second. Let's see. Why is that? Give me a second, please. Okay, but this is not full enough. Okay, I think this is much better. All right. So if you already have okay, much better, I believe. If you already have your Vue application running, you can introduce Pinia by simply running yarn add Pinia if you're using the yarn package manager, or you can use npm, right, by simply running npm install Pinia. This is what I believe most of us are already familiar with. So you just have to run this command, npm install Pinia. In our code here, you see we already have Pinia. So if we check our package.json, when we install packages, this is where it goes in. Okay, we already have Pinia right here. If we go ahead to perform that install again, npm install Pinia, it is going to perform that install. So if you don't have Pinia installed, then yes, it's going to take some time to install Pinia, right? But as you can see, we already have Pinia, so it tells us uh, up to date, right? So I mean, this is already installed. If you don't have this installed, then maybe when you are installing this, you're going to, of course, get a different information here telling you that this was installed. Okay. So this is already installed on our projects here. I will share this with you. But say you are working on a new project, you don't have Pinia set up, then you need to run this command to install Pinia. All right. If you have installed Pinia, the next thing you want to do is to create a Pinia instance, right? So you have to create a Pinia instance in your main. This is our main.js, right? So you see what we have here: import create Pinia from Pinia. All right, so this is basically how you perform that import. You import create Pinia from the Pinia package that we have installed. And next, you, of course, after initializing your app instance, your Vue.js app instance, which I explained how this works I think in the last class, or probably two classes. Uh, yeah, I think that should be in the last class. Okay, so if you already once you have created your app instance, you have to go ahead to use create Pinia, right? So this is how you use this package. Okay, so we have already run the install Pinia. We import Pinia, right? And then next, we basically say app.use create Pinia. All right. Now, once you have introduced this, your application now has access, right, to Pinia, which means you can basically perform imports on various components you have, and Vue would recognize those imports, and of course, um, utilize the actions you are trying to perform, with Pinia. All right. So that is the next thing you want to do. After doing that, you can basically start using Pinia, right? So you see that if you're using Vue 2, you also need to install a plugin and inject the created Pinia at the root of the app. We are currently using Vue 3, by the way, so we don't have to do that. Let us check out our simple store setup. Now, the thing is, if you did not set up your new Vue.js project with Pinia, you are not going to see this folder right here. Okay, if you did not set up your new project with Pinia, you are not going to see this folder right here. So what you have to do is to then go ahead and create this folder called stores, right? So you have to create the folder called stores. Let's click on defining a store. So you see, you have to basically create that particular folder called store, and then you create a file. You have to create a file based on whatever you are trying to work with. If it's a blog, I can say I have a new store here, and I can call that blog.js. Now within the blog.js, I have to basically define a new store this way. Okay, so if you take a look at the code we have here as well, you see the same thing: import define store from Pinia, and then export const. This is basically your store, right? So use counter store. You can call, we can say use block store for our new store, right? Oh, give me a minute. I think I forgot to connect. Oh, just give me a minute. All right, give me a minute, and I'll. All right, guys. Yeah, apologies for that. So I think we're good to go. Right. So I hope you guys can still hear me clearly. All right, let me know in the chat if you can hear me. So what we're trying to do right here is we simply created a new blog.js store, right? And we can call this use blog store. Okay, so we can define our store. We can call this blogs, right? And this is our states right here. So we can simply say we have our blogs in here. By default, we might have no blog, right? We'll get to talk about getters shortly, and actions. I already defined actions, but we'll talk about this shortly again. Okay, so this is what our simple store looks like for now, right? So define store from Pinia, use block store, and we basically define our store alongside the states. All right. So the states we actually have here, this is blogs. All right. Let's just call this, blog store. And we have blogs. All right. So if we use the action, for example, to pull data from a backend, if we have a running backend right now, we can save the content of those data within the state of blogs, which means you are eventually going to get, probably an array of blogs, right? This is basically what to look like. Now, you are not going to see this data like this, okay? But I'm just trying to make you understand, what it would look like. So you have a bunch of items, sitting right here. And when you access these blocks, you should be able to, perform an iteration, like a loop, and, present all this information into your components, right? Just showing you what this looks like as an example. Okay, so this is basically how you define your store. It's not, I mean, this is basically what you have to do. Now we have the state, we have the getters, we have the actions. That is what we're going to be looking at next, right? Just to define what these three section, or these three, core areas of your store actually do. Okay, so we're going to be looking at that now. Let's just jump into states. All right. So let me take a look at the chart. I can see we have a message in the chat. Okay, thank you. I know Loa, thank you. All right. So this is what we're looking at right now, the state. Now, the state is basically the central part of the store, right? And, basically you store the variables that you want to access, the variables that would hold those records, right? You see, we have items, for example. This is expected to hold an array of information. This holds a Boolean record, which is true. This holds a name. It can be a username. It can be your email, right? This holds another Boolean record that checks probably something you can use to check if that particular user that is signed in is an admin or not, right? Yeah, so it just holds a couple of values that we have populated probably from a backend, and we just have to save them here so that when we're in a particular component, we can simply reference and use those items rather than making API calls every single time we need this information. Okay, so the state basically holds those records. All right. Now we are going to be talking about getters shortly, but I want to also show you from our sample application here. So I am simply going to take this off for now. Let us continue working with our counter .js file. So I'm going to run this npm run dev. Let's start off with npm install and npm run dev. So this is going to install, the packages we have in there, and also npm run dev will simply run our application. This is currently running on port 5, yeah, 5.1. Come on, do I have to do that? Oh boy. All right, let's just put this in manually, 5174. So let's come to our browser. I'm simply going to jump into localhost um, 5174. Okay, so this opens our Vite app. So you see, this is what the application looks like. So we can simply perform increments and decrement, right? I would show you the actions that we use in performing this. So you see, we basically have the actions, increment and decrement. We also have a getter for double counts. I would also explain what that is next, right? But how did we access this? We have the count itself, right? When you click on increment or decrement, this is actually, taking, it's actually performing those actions. And I would love to show you how you can see that, from your browser. So you can basically install the Vue.js Dev Tools, right? Let me pin this on my browser. Now, if you don't have the Vue.js Dev Tools, let's go ahead and install from scratch again. So I'm going to check out the Chrome. And by the way, I'm using Chrome, right? So let's check out the Chrome store. Okay, and I'll simply append Vue.js Dev Tools. Okay, all right. So when I perform that search, let's visit. Yeah, so we have the plugin right here. Okay, so this is the browser plugin. I can share the link in the chats. All right, so you can simply pick that up from the chats and access that page. All right, so if you don't have this on Chrome already, what you simply have to do is click on add to Chrome, right? We already have this. That is why we have remove from Chrome. I already have this on my laptop. Okay, so you will be able to use this to actually access what your application looks like. So let's click on inspect. Right, I simply have to right click on inspect. Okay, so you right click and you click on inspect. All right, so when I click on inspect, by the way, this will tell you if you are currently using a Vue.js application. So you see it says Vue.js is detected on this page. Let me zoom in on that so you can see Vue.js is detected on this page. All right, okay. So when I right click and I click on inspect, I can simply see the view tab because I have view running on this page. Okay, so I can see I have the view tab here. When I click on the view tab, you see it shows the components. This basically shows the component that we are rendering here, which is the hello world component. That is what we are rendering. If I go to the app.view, let us see what we are rendering here. Okay, let me check components. Yeah, so I think this is basically what we're rendering here, but we this is basically the component that we have, and we are basically calling that, I believe. Let us check. We're calling the welcome view. Yes, so I believe we're calling the welcome view. All right, and within our app.view, we are basically calling this page hello world. I think that's the confusion. Okay, so we're basically calling this hello world. So that's the confusion we have here. That's why you see hello world. So this is basically what is rendered, right? And the name of this instance, it's called hello world. So it shows that we are rendering hello world. Okay, and hello world basically carries these items in the templates, which is h1 showing the count, h2 showing this description, double counts, and then two buttons, with increment and decrement actions when you click, right? Okay, so if I should click on this right now, you see it shows that we're currently performing some actions here, and of course, I can also check out the states. So I have to click on this, all right, so I have those information here. You see that those are the computed information. There's decrements, increments, okay, all right. And we can as well check out, let's see what we have here. So you can see the code that is being rendered, right? So this is basically the view dev tools, giving us more details about our application, right? Let's close this. Okay, so let's see, we can inspect the DOM, right, with this. And right, so you see we have some other additional, configurations, right? Making the props editable. Maybe while you are working for, debugging purpose, you probably want to, make the props editable, right? As I said earlier, for maybe debugging scenarios, right? You just want to debug and get to understand how your application is actually working. Okay, let's go ahead. I want to refresh this page. Okay, so let's go back into these components. Let me just close this. I think I used the wrong close button there. Let's come back to view. Okay. All right. So now I came back to view. Basically, I had to restart so that I can get, some other information that did not show up initially, right? So that was why I basically refreshed the page. I usually use the term restart instead of refresh, but you get the point. Okay. So now you see we have those computed values. We have the routing because we are using view router. Although we are just on the home page, right? No special routing happening here. We're going to be covering some additional details on routing tomorrow, okay? Because I know we are yet to dive into view router very well, okay? So we're going to be doing that tomorrow. Um, when working with states in a view, as you can see, it is not complex. It is not so complex. We have the getters right here. We have the states, right? And we're going to be looking at how this work next, okay? When I click on increment, you see we are calling this action called double count, which is a getter, and it's basically performing that action and incrementing the value down to 6. And in our code, we are simply taking that value. First of all, we import use counter store from the store, right? And we have a computed function here. Our computed function basically grabs the use counter store and passes that into counter, right? And then we'll return counter.count, which is the single value, right? 1, 2, 3, 4. That's increment. So we're basically grabbing the count itself, which is what we have in the states, right? And then if you take a look at this, you see we have the same thing, right? Another computed value. We have the same thing here, but we are returning counter.double count, right? So this returns double count. So we basically pass count and double count into this into our templates, right? Count and double counts. Okay, and then next, we have our methods. So we have the increment method right here within our component, and our increment method is going to call the increment action, right? So we have const counter equals use counter store, and we say counter dot increment, right? This basically assess that action. We said at this point we say counter dot decrement, which basically assess the decrement action that we have in our store. You can always verify that. In our action here, we have increment and decrement. Now, these are the actions that you can, basically call as methods. So imagine if we have an authentication state, for example, an authentication store, for example, we can have login, right? Login can actually be an action here, right? So login would basically, take some information from the UI and send that information to your backend, right? And if the credentials are correct, you probably get a response with your user information and maybe a token, right? When you get that information, you can come back here and save the user info, for example, right? That can be an array of, maybe an array of objects or just, some objects, okay? So you can basically have null by default, and when you fetch that information, you basically append the value to state.userinfo, okay? And you can also append the token here, or you can choose to add the token as part of your user info if that is what you want to do, right? And logout action can simply come in here and clear those information, including the states, including your user information states and your token states, right? So just giving you an example of how you would want to use this. We are going to build something like that as we progress, in this course. Okay. Yeah. So basically, the work of the action is to map out those methods that you simply want to have, that is related to your store. You have a blog store, for example. You can get blog, you can update blog, you can delete a blog post. Maybe if you are the admin, right? You can perform search on the blog information, right? If that's part of the action that you have on your blog website. Okay, you have an e-commerce store, for example. You can make purchase, you can fetch the products, you can fetch a single product. These things I am mentioning, they are the actions, and these are what you would also log within actions. Okay, so when I click on action right here, you see it says actions are the equivalent of methods in components, right? They can be defined with the action property in define store, and they are perfect to define business logic. Exactly what I stated right now. Okay, so it is similar to what we call methods, right, in our components, and it will basically follow the actions that you really want to perform on that particular module or that particular, store that you've created. Okay. Yes, and within your actions, you can simply assess what you have in the state by simply calling this.count. If you have user info, you can call this.userinfo, right? Whatever record, if you have your token and you've signed in with an action, you can have that particular item, logged within your state. So I'm going to show you another example by simply creating a new file, and we can call this auth.js. Now, auth.js is going to be maybe our user. So let's call that our user. So we're going to say use auth store. Maybe we can call that auth, right? Okay. So here we are going to simply have user info, right? You can keep that as null token. Keep that as null for now. So now you see we have the user info and token. These are the records we have for now. We don't have any information just yet, of course. Okay, so we basically have the getter. We don't need this yet. We'll talk about that shortly. So in the actions, this is where I can log my sign in, for example, right? I'll say sign in will be performed here. Okay, so I can have my sign up. Okay, so I can of course say sign up action will be performed here. So if we have some backend API, maybe we're using Axios, for example, we can basically perform a post. If I'm not mistaken, I think this is how it works. So we can perform a post with our endpoint, which is our URL. So it can be like HTTPS, maybe our backend.com/API/ sign up. This is just an example, by the way. This is not real. Okay, so we have our data, and our data might be our username or our email, right? Maybe me@mav.com, and our password. Okay, so it can be 12345. Just giving you an example. Okay, so this is basically what it would look like, and when you perform this request, maybe you are probably using some async awaits, right, so that you can at least wait for the feedback as well. So we have async awaits, and we maybe call this user, let's call this sign in or sign up. Oh, this is sign up. Okay, so I think this is wrong. What we are basically doing here is sign in. That's what I'm trying to show you as an example. So let me just bring that in here. Hope that makes sense. Okay, so we can simply say const record equals this. So when we get that record back, async, when we get that record back, what we probably want to do is, let's see, it says we have some error. Let's try to figure out. Wait, is only, yeah, we have a sync. Do we have a problem? Let's see. That's weird. So async signing. I don't know. Maybe that is just my. You need to mark this function as async. Did you mean to? Okay, so I think maybe it's just my browser. It's just my editor doing this stuff. Okay, so yeah, but if we are basically getting the const record just like this, we probably want to then say when we get the record, maybe we'll get our user info, right, and the token. So we can say this.user info equals the response that we get, right? So it can be record data user info, and I'm just giving an example here. So that user info would basically contain things like we have just signed in. It might contain things like username, right? It might contain full name. Okay, let's make this more JavaScript like. So full name, maybe first name, last name. Maybe it contains your email as well. Of course, you already have your email, but let's just say it contains your email in the response as well, and probably contains some JWT token, right? Yeah, so you just signed in and you get your JWT token. Now this might be, we can have user info right here. Now, as you can see, this is an object. I'm just, composing some objects here, right? Okay, so our JWT token might just be a string, right? So string of JWT token or JW token, JSON web token. Yeah, so for the JSON web token, by the way, guys, this is simply a response value. So we can say const response equals blah, blah, blah. Okay, so you have all the information in here, by the way. Mav11, first name Mav, last name Solomon, for example. Your email, maybe me@solo.com. Right, so this is the kind of information you might get as a response, and then now that you've grabbed this information as your response, you probably want to, let's close this, you probably want to go ahead and say we want to save response dot info, right? So probably want to say, okay, this dot user info equals response dot info dot user info, sorry. So this is what we probably want to do now. This is going to save the user info option here, the user info section here, sorry. It's going to save the user info section here into your user info state. And if you say this dot our token, so this dot our token equals our response dot token or dot JWT token. Now this is basically going to save the JWT token that you've gotten as a response from your backend into the into the token section here, right? So whenever you're making feature requests, you can simply grab the token from that section. Okay, so it's as easy as that. You basically make those requests and save what you get as a response into the states. so that you can reuse that. The same way you are making a call to get a blog information, maybe fetch all blogs, for example, right? You probably do some paginated calls to your backend. It comes back with the blog information, which is probably an array of blogs, and you simply pass, the this dot blog equals. You simply save the whole item you have, maybe in your um, response.data, for example. You save the entire response into your states, and you are able to access that, within your application. So we're not going to save that. That was just an example. We don't have a valid backend, for actually testing this. Okay, but we're going to do this, in a more realistic scenario later. So now we are able to understand how to work with actions and states. Let's simply talk about getters. If you have any questions, do well to ask your questions in the chat, guys, so I can take them. We're already at 8:57. Yeah. So basically, the getters are the equivalent of what we call computed values for the states, right? Yeah. So basically, the same way we use computed values in our components, the getters are giving us that ability to also grab data from our states, perform some computation on that data, and return that particular chunk of code, that block of code, as a computed function or a computed value. We call it a computed value, but it's basically working like a function. So let's take a look at what that looks like in our example, right? So we already have a state called counts, and right here we defined a getter. We call this getter double count. So this is how you define a getter. You can have more getters. So we can have more getters here. And of course, you always want to pass in the states if you want to grab items from the states, which you probably want to do. So you grab the item from the states. So if you have a different item in your state here, maybe like user info, you can grab that in here as well, user info, right? And of course, perform anything you want to do here, mapping, filtering, whatever it is, right? You're basically creating that computed, that computed value, so that by the time you call that getter, you already performed an action. So you're seeing the result as you are basically seeing the result as a value based on some actions that has happened already in the getter, but you don't need to think about those actions or those computation within your component. You just call them here, and you can reuse them. Okay, so you have actions for making those calls, making those actions. These are your methods basically. And when you call this, you basically end up, redefining or initializing the value of your state. And you can use getters to perform additional computation on the items you have within the states, just like what we've done here. So we have counts, and now we have double counts. So double count was not defined as a state, but it was basically defined, to alter the state, not to alter the main value and just leave it like that, but of course to give us a new variable that would contain, the computation that we performed with the value we have in the state, right? So that is saved into double count, and we can now use this as a variable. Hope that makes the Pinia documentation here. What we have defined right now is basically the foundation of what you need to know. States, getters, actions. I want us to go ahead and read through what we have here. You see, we have some other sample getters like double plus one, right? This is basically what is this doing? Let's see what this is doing. So this is basically returning what you already have in the double count plus one. So we did not bother to assess what we have in the count, but we basically just take what we have in the double count, which is already assessing the state, and we add one to that value. All right. Hope that makes sense, guys. Yeah, so if you have more questions, feel free, drop questions on the WhatsApp group or the Discord server, tag my name, and I can respond. Go ahead and play around with this. We have some sample APIs you can simply test with. You can check out JSON placeholder, right? Simply type, sample public APIs on the internet, and I'm sure you would find lots and lots of them. So we have public API. Okay, so I can't really remember the exact name, but there's this API, there's this website Is it API? Hey, no, it is not. I can't remember. Public API. Okay, so I haven't used this one, but let's see what that looks like. Okay, so I think we have a bunch of APIs here, and these are public, so we can probably experiment with some of them. This looks games and comics. Yeah, you can basically click. Let's see games and comics. If you can have some info. I don't know. I haven't used this, but it seems interesting. So let's click on superheroes. Okay, so you probably need some API key. Let's click on use this API. So it takes us to superhero.com, and yeah, hopefully it's free, right? Because it mentioned free. Okay, so you basically have to pass in your API, your access token when using this. Okay, and these are the endpoints. These are your endpoints. So this is what we call endpoints. So you basically call, slash ID, slash power start, slash biography, and all that. Um, yeah, so this is how you use the API. You put in the access token and the character ID. So every character has a character ID that you can probably find in the documentation to understand, the info of the characters, right? So we have a lot of things you can actually check about the character. This is basically this is good, right? But I don't know. This might be too much for you if you're just starting out. So if you know any website where you can grab API information, um, free APIs. That makes sense. Free APIs. Let's see. API Henny, API. I mean, there's this popular one I have, and I'm sure it's in my bookmarks, right? I would have to probably look for it. Um, yeah, probably have to look for it. Open API. Okay, that's giving me open API. So I'll probably have to search for it. Remind me on WhatsApp or Discord if you still need it. But if you can find it, also remember to share to others on the WhatsApp group or the Discord server. So do have a wonderful evening, guys, and I'll see you in the next class tomorrow. Um, Take care and yeah, have fun. Bye.